Weeds are the enemy every gardener knows too well. Hours on your knees, pulling and tugging, only to watch them come right back. But what if I told you our grandparents already solved this problem? They didn't rely on sprays or gadgets. They planted living weed fighters that worked around the clock to choke out the competition. Some spread like carpets, some walled off beds with fragrance, and some built underground networks tougher than concrete. And here's the best part. Many of them are still around, waiting to take the fight out of your hands. Let's look at 20 garden plants that destroyed weeds long before chemicals ever came along. Lavender was more than a pretty plant in Grandma's garden. Its calming fragrance drifted through the yard and into the house, bringing peace to anyone who brushed against it. But what most people never realized is that lavender doubled as a natural weed barrier. The oils that give lavender its signature scent also make the soil around it tough for weed seeds to sprout. Its dense silvery foliage shaded the ground like living mulch, keeping light away from anything that tried to grow underneath. Once planted, lavender created a protective border that held strong season after season. A row of it could transform a patch once full of weeds into one of the tidiest, most admired parts of the garden. And with just a light trim each year, it asked for little in return while giving so much back. Sweet Alyssum was the little flower that worked harder than it looked. Its tiny white, pink, or purple blooms spread low and fast, weaving themselves into a thick carpet across bare soil. That blanket wasn't just pretty, it left no space for weeds to sneak through. Gardeners loved how easy it was to start, often just scattering seeds in spring and letting the plant take over by midsummer. By evening, the air carried a soft, honey-like fragrance that wrapped the garden in calm, making even a small patch feel special. Through heat, drought, and poor soil, Alyssum stayed strong and kept growing. For families who didn't have the time or strength to weed constantly, it was a simple way to cover the ground and enjoy beauty at the same time. Hostas. This one will solve every frustrating, shady garden situation you face. Hostas. You know those difficult areas in your yard where nothing seems to grow except weeds, under big trees, along dark walls, or shaded corners you've given up on. Hostas turn those forgotten spaces into lush, weed-free showcases. Their broad, overlapping leaves act like a living umbrella, shading the soil so weed seeds never sprout. From tiny minis with coin-sized leaves to giants with leaves larger than platters, they create dense carpets that smother weeds with ease. The variety is stunning: deep greens, glowing yellows, rich blues, and striking variegated patterns. They even send up elegant flower spikes in summer that attract hummingbirds. Easy to plant and care for, hostas only get better with age, expanding into impressive clumps that keep weeds out year after year. Mint now, we reach our fourth plant, and this one will change how you look at weeds forever. Mint, yes, that same herb you crush into tea or sprinkle on desserts, is one of nature's most aggressive weed fighters. What frustrates most gardeners about mint is actually its greatest gift. It spreads underground through runners that create a living net, sealing off the soil so weeds can't get a foothold. Picture it as an underground patrol system working day and night, shutting down intruders before they even sprout. Above ground, you're harvesting fresh herbs for the kitchen, enjoying that unmistakable fragrance every time you brush past. The trick is control. Plant mint in a buried pot or with edging, and it works for you, not against you. With mint, you don't just beat weeds, you turn a problem plant into a powerful garden ally. Creeping Jenny, moneywort. Creeping Jenny was the golden carpet many old gardens leaned on. Its round leaves, bright with yellow-green light, spread quickly across the ground and locked weeds out before they had a chance. Once it touched soil, it sent out runners that rooted themselves, forming a living mat that expanded each season. Families used it to cover bare corners, shady banks, and even walls, watching it tumble down like a green waterfall. It thrived in sun or shade, wet soil or dry, making it one of the most forgiving ground covers you could plant. Over time, it made the garden look more alive, glowing especially in dark spaces where other plants struggled. Creeping Jenny was beauty and hard work in one, turning forgotten patches into bright, weed-free ground. Daylilies. Daylilies. Those trumpet-shaped flowers in fiery orange, red, and yellow aren't just for show. Beneath them is a dense root system that spreads like a living shield, making it nearly impossible for weeds to break through. Above the soil, the long, arching leaves form a thick canopy, blocking sunlight and leaving weed seeds in total darkness. Once daylilies mature, they create self-sustaining clumps that only get stronger and wider each season, smothering weeds as they expand. And while they work, you enjoy weeks of non-stop blooming, fresh buds opening day after day, giving you a garden that looks cared for, even if you've barely lifted a finger. They thrive in poor soil, in heat, and even in drought, making them one of the toughest and most rewarding allies against weeds. Ferns are one of the oldest weed fighters on Earth. These ancient plants have been perfecting ground cover for over 300 million years, and they still outperform most modern options. Their secret is in their root system, rhizomes that creep horizontally underground, sending up fronds wherever they spread. The result is a living carpet that weeds simply cannot invade. Once ferns take hold, it's like trying to grow weeds in the middle of a forest floor, leaving no room. Their beauty adds to their strength. From evergreen Christmas ferns to silvery Japanese painted ferns, there's a type for nearly every shady corner. Tough, adaptable, and low maintenance, ferns steadily expand their reach each year, replacing weeds with a green tapestry that only grows more enchanting over time. Creeping Phlox up next is a plant that has a way of stealing the spotlight in spring. Creeping Phlox. Gardeners plant it along rock walls, paths, or bare slopes, and soon watch as the ground disappears under a blanket of color. Bright pinks, soft purples, and snowy whites spill over edges, forming a living quilt so thick that weeds never stand a chance. Beneath those blooms is a tough mat of evergreen foliage that clings to the soil year-round, holding it firm and shutting out light that weed seeds need to grow. What makes Creeping Phlox remarkable is how little it asks in return. Once settled, it spreads with steady confidence, needing little more than ordinary soil and sunshine. A patch that once needed constant weeding becomes a carpet of lasting beauty, and every spring it rewards the garden with another burst of color that feels effortless. Ajuga, or bugleweed, has a quiet way of taking over the ground, but it does so with charm. Its rosettes of dark leaves, often tinged with purple or bronze, spread across the soil until no open space remains. Wherever the runners touch down, they root and send up new growth, weaving a dense mat that keeps weeds from ever finding a foothold. In spring, short spikes of blue flowers rise just above the foliage, adding a sudden splash of color that surprises anyone walking by. Gardeners often use Ajuga in shaded corners, under trees, or places where grass simply refuses to grow. Once it takes hold, it asks for very little care, thriving where other plants give up. With Ajuga, those forgotten patches become polished, weed-free spaces that look cared for even when no effort is made. Liriope. Few plants handled weeds at the garden's edge as well as Liriope. Its arching green leaves grew thick and low, closing the soil beneath in solid cover that weeds could not break through. Gardeners often lined borders and walkways with it, knowing it would spread slowly but steadily into neat clumps that joined together over time. In summer, stalks of purple flowers stood above the foliage, adding color without ever giving up its main duty of smothering weeds. Unlike grass that falters in poor soil or shade, Liriope held its ground in nearly any condition, asking for little care in return. Once planted, it became a dependable edge, green, tidy, and free of weeds year after year. Pachysandra has long been a favorite for covering shady ground that would otherwise be full of weeds. Its glossy green leaves form a thick, low-growing carpet that blocks sunlight from reaching the soil, leaving no chance for weed seeds to sprout. Once planted, it slowly creeps outward, knitting together into an unbroken mat that holds steady through the seasons. In spring, small white flowers appear close to the foliage, adding a subtle brightness beneath the trees. What gardeners love most about Pachysandra is its reliability. It thrives in deep shade where other plants fail and stays green even through winter, providing year-round cover. A few plants, given time, will spread into wide patches that require almost no upkeep. Where weeds once ruled, Pachysandra creates order and calm, transforming bare soil into a tidy living ground cover. Comfrey was a powerhouse in old gardens, valued for its ability to suppress weeds while replenishing the soil. Its broad, rough leaves rose in thick clusters, casting deep shade that made it nearly impossible for weeds to sprout underneath. Once the roots sank in, they grew long and strong, digging deep into the ground and claiming the space completely. Gardeners often planted comfrey along edges or in problem patches, where its fast growth turned weedy corners into solid green cover. The bonus was that those leaves could be cut and used as natural mulch, breaking down into rich compost that improved the soil even further. With every season, comfrey grew stronger, smothering weeds at the surface while enriching the ground below, leaving no space wasted. Wild ginger. Wild ginger is one of those quiet plants that changes the way a shady corner feels. Its heart-shaped leaves spread low and wide, quickly overlapping to form a natural ground cover that weeds cannot push through. Beneath the soil, its rhizomes crawl steadily, adding new shoots each season until the entire patch is filled. The plant gets its name from the faint, spicy scent of its roots, though it is not the ginger used in cooking. In spring, hidden near the base of the leaves, small maroon flowers appear, often missed unless you bend low to find them. Wild ginger thrives in rich, damp soil, and once established, it becomes nearly effortless to maintain. Over time, it creates a lush carpet that smothers weeds while giving the garden floor a soft woodland look. Sweet Woodruff. You know those whorls of narrow green leaves spread gently across the soil, weaving into a soft carpet that shades out weeds? Yup, that's Sweet Woodruff, a plant that feels as if it belongs in an old cottage garden. In spring, tiny white flowers appear, delicate and star-shaped, filling the air with a light, sweet fragrance. When the leaves are dried, they keep that scent, which was once used in old times to perfume linens or flavor drinks. In the garden, Sweet Woodruff thrives in shady, moist spots where grass and many flowers struggle to grow. Once it takes hold, it fills the ground with a natural order that weeds cannot break. Low care and quietly beautiful, it creates an old-world charm while keeping the soil beneath clean and weed-free. Vinca minor, Periwinkle. Periwinkle is one of the most dependable weed fighters you can plant. Its trailing stems creep across the soil, rooting as they go, until they form a dense mat of glossy evergreen leaves. In spring, cheerful blue or purple flowers appear, giving bursts of color that brighten shaded corners where little else grows. Gardeners often relied on periwinkle to cover banks, slopes, or the ground beneath trees because it needed almost no care once it was established. By spreading quickly and holding the soil in place, it kept weeds from ever finding space to grow. Even through winter, the green leaves remain, making sure the ground stays neat year-round. Periwinkle's quiet strength is in how it works constantly in the background, leaving behind clean, tidy garden beds with almost no effort. Creeping Thyme. Creeping thyme might be small, but it works like a quiet army against weeds. Its tiny green leaves spread close to the soil, weaving into a living mat that leaves no space uncovered. By midsummer, that mat erupts in a blanket of purple or pink blossoms, so dense that it looks like the ground itself is flowering. Every step across it releases a warm, herbal scent that lingers in the air and reminds gardeners why it was cherished for generations. What most people overlook is how its stubborn nature is its greatest strength. It thrives in poor soil, shrugs off heat, and even tolerates the press of footsteps, all while keeping weeds locked out. Creeping thyme proves that sometimes the smallest plants are the most relentless, creating a garden floor that is both beautiful and fiercely protective. Ground clover. Once a standard companion in old gardens, ground clover was valued not just for its green cover, but for the quiet work it did beneath the soil. Its low, three-leaf clusters spread quickly, closing every gap until weeds simply gave up trying to grow. In summer, white blossoms dotted the carpet, drawing bees and adding life to the garden floor. Children remembered plucking the little flowers and searching for the lucky four-leaf stems, never realizing the plant was also feeding the earth. Clover fixes nitrogen back into the soil, enriching it without effort or chemicals, which is why older gardeners often trusted it over grass. Hardy, stubborn, and dependable, ground clover still does what it always did best, covering the ground, improving the soil, and leaving no room at all for weeds to take hold. Lamium, dead nettle. Lamium is one of the toughest weed blockers for shade. Dead nettle. Its silver-streaked leaves form a spreading carpet that moves quickly across the soil, leaving no space for weeds to take hold. In spring, purple, pink, or white flowers rise above the foliage, but the real work happens below. The dense mat shades the ground so thoroughly that weed seeds never get the light they need to sprout. Once lamium is established, it simply takes over, turning bare, weedy corners under trees or along fences into clean, living ground cover. Gardeners loved it because it asks for almost nothing yet keeps giving year after year. The thicker it grows, the fewer weeds survive, until the space belongs entirely to lamium. Winter creeper. Winter creeper may look like a simple evergreen, but once it takes hold, it becomes a year-round defense against weeds. Its glossy leaves spread low and tight, creating a living mat that weeds cannot push through. The secret lies in its growth habit. Winter creeper crawls across the soil and up over low walls, rooting wherever its stems touch, stitching together a solid cover that leaves no room for invaders. While it holds the ground in check, it also thrives through cold months, staying green when other plants fade away. Gardeners once planted it to handle the toughest spots, shaded beds, banks, or edges where weeds seemed impossible to control. Over time, those once weedy areas turned into neat, weed-free stretches of deep green, with winter creeper doing the quiet work all on its own. Sedum, often called stonecrop, earned its place in gardens by thriving where little else would grow. It starved weeds of every chance to grow. Its thick, fleshy leaves formed tight mats that hugged the soil so closely that light never reached the weed seeds below. As the plants spread, they created a living shield across bare patches, turning rocky soil and forgotten corners into solid green carpets. When summer came, star-shaped flowers added bursts of color, but their real gift was the protection beneath. Weeds that once thrived in open ground simply couldn't break through sedum's dense cover. Gardeners planted it where nothing else would last, and year after year it quietly expanded, replacing weeds with beauty while asking for almost no care in return. Old gardeners knew the best way to fight weeds was to let the right plants do the work for them. These same plants still thrive today, holding the ground, keeping weeds out, and leaving you more time to enjoy your garden. Which one would you love to try? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed watching, give this video a hype. See you on the next one.